to be hit very hard indeed.
What can be done to reverse the spiral?
Yeah. So look, the issue of the build out of gas and coal is complicated. If you look at that on a case by case basis, then the case doesn't stack up. That for example, we've unpacked the gas transition, so to speak, in critical countries in East Asia and South Asia, and what you see very, very clearly is that building up gas use is going to slow down renewables, and that's also a conclusion you find in other papers. Now, I'm sorry, I missed your first question because of some background noise. What was the first part of the question?
It was about the IEA.
Oh yeah, the IEA use. Well, look, actually, that's a very interesting thing. What the IEA has shown for the first time in its business as usual pathway is that fossil fuel use in general peaks in the next 15 to 20 years. To my knowledge, that's the first time the IEA has shown that. In part, it's due to policies, but it's also significantly due to the other factor I mentioned, that the IEA is slowly but surely beginning to include the really rapidly declining cost of renewables, the rapidly declining cost of electric vehicles, and the ability to decarbonise the so-called hard-to-abate sectors without using carbon-intensive technology. So they're the factors going on there. The IEA is not supporting the business as usual pathway. It's just saying that's what it is, and it's a good assessment, but it shouldn't be a guide to where the gas industry should go. The gas industry should be focused on getting out of the fossil gas business and getting into the clean green hydrogen business, I would say.
Next question, this one in the front.
Hi, Sarah Kaplan from the Washington Post. So I just wanted to clarify one thing. Did I hear correctly that you said 70% of the planned gas expansion is in North America? Because we've heard so much discussion this week about planned gas projects in Africa. So that sort of surprised me. And then I think the other thing is just, again, on this topic of, there's been many, we've heard a lot about this idea of gas as a transition fuel. I mean, world leaders were even talking about it during the World Leaders Summit this week. Is there anything that could happen here at COP that would change, that could shift these trajectories that you guys have identified in your analysis? Like, what needs to happen over the next week and a half to improve the outlook on gas?
Okay. On the geographic breakdown of the under construction, approved and proposed LNG plant, around 73%, according to the literature, is in North America, most of it in the United States. About 9% is in North Africa and about 9% in sub-Saharan Africa. So that gives you a sense of where the build-up is actually happening. On the question of finance, I'll start out with that. The big challenge is the finance available for renewable energy development in developing countries. That is the big gap here. We all know here in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, the finance issue is the big one. It's easy to get money into gas development for different reasons. It's hard for countries to get the finance needed for renewable energy development. That's what needs to change.
Mia?
I also wanted to add a point on gas in Africa. So actually what we're seeing and what is quite dangerous here is that we also see developed countries now thinking about investing public money into gas in Africa. So we've had signs, for example, from the German government. We've heard the discussions that are ongoing for possible investments in Senegal. So that is also something that clearly needs to end. There needs to be a commitment from developed countries, from the G7, not to invest in gas in Africa and instead massively support a clean and just energy transition in Africa. So that's really important. We also did some analysis earlier this year as part of the Climate Action Tracker on gas in Africa specifically, and it's not very clear actually that there is a strong economic case for gas. In fact, many of the countries on the African continent that are oil and gas producers have had lower economic growth than those who are not producers. So there's no clear case also from an economic point of view that that is the right way to go.
At the back, right, and yeah.
Hi, John Ainger, Bloomberg News. Thanks very much. The EU is obviously front and center of this, given it's trying to get away from Russian gas. It says that the war will accelerate the transition to a green economy. How does this report tally with that? And secondly, the EU has also said that while it is seeking gas partnerships with Africa, much of that will be for hydrogen. Is that something that you buy into? Thank you.
Yeah, on the EU gas issue, as far as we can calculate, the import capacity of liquefied natural gas into the European Union is roughly in balance with replacing Russian gas. So we don't see that the EU is in principle challenged in meeting its targets by the replacement of Russian gas through LNG import capacity. There is a concern that if some of that capacity has a long life, more than a few years, then it will create really serious issues for the European Union. Nicholas?
Yeah, and there was a question whether the war also gives a momentum towards accelerating the transition towards efficiency and renewables. We see that as well, a little bit, but not as strong as the impulse to do more gas infrastructure. Yeah, so some countries are indeed updating their renewable targets. I think many that use gas right now have understood, well, banking on cheap gas is not a good idea, and they have thought now of how to change it. But these are long-term things. It doesn't happen from today. It is a long-term trajectory. And whether these positive effects outweigh the negative ones, we can't say right now. What we can say, and what we do say here, is that the negative effects are huge, and we can't quantify them. And if these negative effects are happening, then we'll have a very hard time with the 1.5 degree target. The other argument that the gas infrastructure could be used for hydrogen later on, I think is a wrong argument. In any case, you have to do additional investments to make this infrastructure also work for hydrogen or other renewable fuels. And the decision whether use that or not, they have to be taken today. So for example, if you have a tank, that tank has to use a certain steel to be used not only for gas but also for hydrogen. And if you don't do that now, do this additional investment to use this additional, this special steel for this infrastructure, you will not be able to use it for hydrogen. And now that everything is done so quickly, I think that investors will not invest in this extra steel that maybe in the future makes them use it for hydrogen. So using that infrastructure for hydrogen in the future, I think is a false argument.
Just quickly on the green hydrogen one, this is a very, very interesting lot of developments going on, and there's quite some very large projects being developed in Africa, Mauritania, Namibia, so on. And I think these provide a real opportunity for Africa to become a major exporter of green energy in the form of hydrogen to the principal markets at present being Europe. What the Europeans need to do is stop pushing gas
the world's most witnessed event. The Mother of the World invites you to confront together the climate crisis. Efforts united in fulfilling global goals. Solutions for the world's most pressing challenges. COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, 2022.
Different financial capacities to deal with it. So we can argue forever, but science and scientists give us the kind of guidance to cut the endless arguments, because as I've been saying before, the loss and damage file, as important as it is, it was lost in endless arguments and discussions. Now it's different. It's on the agenda with high anticipation, especially from folks like our sisters and brothers in Pakistan, in developing economies, and even in advanced economies that had the lives and livelihoods compromised because of lack of attention to the climate action at large and the loss and damage file in particular. Having said that, thank you so much for your work, and we are behind you as Climate Champions team. I think my good friends here, Rama, Juani, and Maria, did I miss anything? No, I didn't? Okay, well, this is an exceptional moment then, because they always say, well, we wish that you would have said this, that, and the other, but I think this time I've been getting the nods. So I passed this test today. Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud. Previous one. So before I start with the next panel, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Marcia Toledo. I'm the Resilience Lead of the Climate Champions team. I'll be moderating these sessions. There are going to be 3 conversations coming, and we're going to have also other leads coming and supporting those conversations. We would like to encourage that you also can share your thoughts, your opinion, your ability to also complement ideas. We're not going to have question and answers, but mostly if you have a thought that you would like to share, to expand, to complement, we're going to be able as well to bring the mic to 2 to 3 interventions, just small, so that we can achieve the timeline we have. But wanted to put that ahead so you can think about as well, what would you like to share that we can help complement the discussion we're going to have. So, previous one. Before we start, I would like to invite the next panel, which is conformed by Karen Sack, Executive Director of Ocean Risk and Resilience Alliance, Sylvie Wabbs, Resilience Lead of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Anna Asti, Undersecretary of Rio de Janeiro on Water, Natural Resources and Investments, Sheila Patel, Founder Director of the Society for Promotion and Area Research Centers, and Ashwin Dajal, Senior Vice President, Power and Climate, the Rockefeller Foundation. Thank you. In this panel, we will be addressing why it's important to tackle and accelerate adaptation and resilience, understanding the systems, the different systems that have high impact, and how we can do that, how we can accelerate radical collaboration for that. So all the mics should work. Can you test yours? Hello? Perfect. Thank you. So I'll start with you, Karen. You are working as a Race to Resilience partner and an alliance that brings many different actors together. You are understanding the different solutions, the challenges. Tell us why it's so critical that we address urgent action for oceans to accelerate adaptation and resilience.
Thank you so much for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here and to be a partner with Race to Resilience. So we have the air conditioning on today, but 50 degrees Celsius is the temperature at which human cells start to degrade. If it weren't for the ocean and the amount of heat from our emissions that the ocean has absorbed, our average mean temperature globally would be 50 degrees Celsius. And this air conditioning noise would not even be helpful to us. Because of the ocean, the average mean temperature globally at the moment is 13 degrees Celsius. So the ocean is not a nice to have. It's an essential planetary asset. And we haven't really focused on why we need to protect it in the past. So the question for us really now is how we nurture that asset, how we can drive investment into it. And to do that, really the answer is both nature and nurture. And I think we all know from some of the comments that Catherine made earlier that nature can deliver up to 30% of climate solutions. And the incredible thing about nature is that it's been adapting to change and building resilience for millennia. So let's learn from it, and let's work with nature and nurture those solutions by driving investment into it, working with communities to do so as well. And that's where Aura comes in, through this collaboration, really working at the intersect of finance, climate and ocean policy with partners from the private sector, the public sector, civil society and multilateral organizations to drive significant investment into the space at scale.
Thank you, Karen. Important is that different sectoral approach and the urgency, as you said. If we do not take action now, it's going to be too late. We're going to see the impacts of a warming ocean.
Absolutely.
Sylvie, you're working for many years advancing opportunities for increasing resilience in agriculture and food systems. Why is urgent that we take that multi-sectoral view, that we take a system view, and how we can accelerate this?
Thank you, Marcia. Yes, we need to take joined-up action not only for agri-food system, but across systems. And the way Karen spoke about ocean is key, and share that language. But let me just speak about the agri-food system, which is really need to transform to become one of the main solutions to the climate crisis. We not only need to do that for tackling the climate crisis, but also for the food crisis. Today, we have more than 200 million people suffering from acute food insecurity. That's not acceptable. And tackling some of the food crisis issues is very important, and tackling climate change goes together with that. So that's one of the very strong justification for urgent action. So both climate is one of the drivers of hunger. Together with conflict and with other crises and disasters, climate change does not act alone. It's a driver of major risks, extreme events, but also agriculture, food production, which is a climate-sensitive activity, is very exposed to multiple shocks and stresses. You have the whole list of shock and stresses from climate change. In addition to the number of people who have agriculture and food type of livelihood, we count about 2.5 billion people with agricultural livelihoods. That's including fishers and fish farmers, by the way. But there's probably more than 4 billion people with food-related activities, of food actors. And they're extremely vulnerable and affected and threatened by climate change. So that's another element for the urgency to act. We have the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021 that has been putting and advocating for transforming our food system in a more inclusive, resilient, sustainable way, because today it's failing to deliver on these three dimensions. So we have a system approach that's on the agenda, which is still need to act together urgently. We also know that agriculture sectors absorb more than 26% of the total economic losses from climate-related disasters. And listen to this, when it comes to drought, it's 80%. It's huge. We've seen what's going on in the 5th consecutive drought in the Horn of Africa today. Another argument for urgent action. In addition, the smallholders, small farmers, fishers, tree dwellers, livestock owners, they produce more than 80% of the food supply in developing countries. 80%. And they are on the front line of climate change. Isn't that not another argument for acting quickly, fast, now? So I think this is all the rationale for really putting the transformation of a system, which means from production to consumption, including processing, distribution, refrigeration, and up to the table, a system approach for addressing multiple climate risk and impacts across all these different value chains, putting emphasis on the people and the local action. I think I stop here on the solution. Thank you.
Fantastic. Sylvie, excellent. You very well summarized that opportunity across the entire system, but as well as you said, with a people focus, the people at the front line suffering from not access to food or not ability to produce because of droughts and other challenges, so other climate impacts. Anna, you're working in a highly populated state, and you struggle with challenges with all the cycle of water, access, provision, and sanitation. As an Undersecretary for Rio de Janeiro, what is the urgency that you have? And how are you addressing both engaging on planning and finance for resilient approaches, for resilient decisions that include lowering mitigation, but at the same time enhances water security, restore the nature. What is the urgency and how are you delivering that? How are you responding to that?
Thanks. Hello, everyone. 100 years ago, we were only 500,000 people in the metropolitan area of Rio. There was no metropolitan area in Rio de Janeiro. We are now 13 million people. So in 100 years, the population just jumped. And how were we prepared for this amazing process? It was amazing. And what happens now is that we have our sanitation reach more or less 50% of 13 million people. So we lack sanitation, we lack lots of important public service. Last year, we just succeeded to make, after 30 years late in the process, our sanitation process, and we will be in the next 10 years 90% sanitized. Why is this important? Because this will be our way to get to be a blue metropolis. That's our plan now. We have just started a state program for water security, and it's aimed for 20 years. And it's very important because water security is now what's, wow, a plane. Water security for us, it's our way through to go into adaptation. We just, this year we lost more than 300 people in one night, in one rain, silting area. Last year, more or less the same thing, every year, and it's getting closer and closer. The time that we have the dry weather and the water, it's really closer now. So we have to adapt and we have to invest in water security. This year we will be invested $1.2 billion in water security. This in the next 5 years, more or less. So this is something that is really urgent in our area. It's not for the next 10 years. We have to do it now. And it's really a crisis that we are living there, especially now when summer is starting. Yeah. So we have started the Blue Economy Project. We have more or less in our coast 10 million people living in the coast of Rio de Janeiro. 44% our GDP comes from the ocean economy. So it's really an important matter for us. And what we have now is that basic nature solutions, it's really very important to get our fresh water possible for us to drink. Because even if we invest in depolluting and sanitation and everything, we need to preserve fresh water. And to preserve fresh water, we have technology already, and it's forest. So we need to preserve our forests. And what we have in the last 10 years, we didn't deforestate in Rio, but in the last century, we deforestate a lot. And our aim for 2050 is to achieve 10% plus in our Mata Atlântica forest, our rainforest. This means 441,000 hectares of forest. We have in our Mata Atlântica fund, which is a blended finance fund, we have now 120 million, but we would need $5 billion to reforestate 10% of Mata Atlântica forest. So it's something huge. We need really to invest in new platforms to access finance. So we are now, we have an MOU with Nasdaq Technology through GEAP, and we will start a platform, environmental asset platform in Rio de Janeiro. By the end of the year, we started the first operations for carbon credit. It's a private platform, it's not a public platform. We will be entering the platform with our public assets, our forests. We have more or less 1.4 million of hectares in forest now. We want to achieve 1.7, but we have 1.4 now. And, what intrigues me and what I want to learn, and I think that to be in COP it will be really important, is that how we see the financing structure for a territory, for a region. So what I'm saying, I have different kinds of environmental assets. Water can be an asset. Credit water. How do I plan credit water in an environmental asset platform? So all of this we are thinking inside our blue economy plan for the next 20 years in Rio. Sorry.
Fantastic.
Lots
No.
of information, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Anna. Actually, you help us expand the thinking we're having, collaboration, partnerships, many solutions towards one common goal, systemic, across sectors, across the value chain, focusing on people, like what Sylvie said. And you are bringing the perspective of improved planning, innovative finance mechanisms and approaches, and also consider strongly nature-based solutions at the core. No? So thank you for sharing your experience. And Sheila, you're working very hard to address the challenges on human settlements, on informal settlements. And you have also a vision and a campaign coming up in the next days. Tell us the urgency and how you think this can be addressed.
So thank you very much for inviting me in this August speakers lineup. Today, Catherine, thank you very much for giving me the segue for why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm part of an amazing global network of slum dwellers in 33 countries where women's collectives are at the heart of this process. They are the ones who design, construct, finance their own homes, despite what governments try to do. And they are at a loss today on how to protect themselves in these new extreme climate conditions, which they don't understand when, which one will hit them where. Their building techniques, their systems of their survival, food, transport, health, everything is completely dysfunctional because what they did in the past is no longer functional anymore. And it's amazing that women themselves put a list of things. These are 50 women from these 33 countries who we call our global leaders, who put together this list of 5 things of what we want to understand so we can make change happen. And Roof Over Our Heads is the first campaign. It's interesting that we are in the MENA region, where in Arabic, Ruh means soul. And they say that our home is our protection and it is the soul of our understanding of who we are and where we live. So our campaign seeks to create a women-centered process in which the new science of climate, of technologies, of construction, of measurements, of how change has to be monitored, of new techniques of design for passive and active heating are understood by women on the ground, who are also the litmus test of all these magical things that we talk about, which fly over their heads. They don't understand what you mean when you say these things. So how in the lives of these 2 billion people whose people they represent, there are 2 billion people who today live in these conditions, and in the next 10 years, it is anticipated that there will be another 1.5 billion climate refugees coming into the cities, and you know that they are going to be in these informal settlements. So they see themselves as torchbearers of integrating this new knowledge, of testing the solutions that all of us are throwing at them, so that they become the petri dish in which this transformation happens. So we are anticipating that there will be 100 such groups in 30 to 40 countries. We have invited, you have been very kind to help us with our roundtables, bringing everybody together. But we are hoping in the next 2 years, we will develop climate linked. You know, we are informed by science that there are 5 major climatic zones for cities. We're going to test what solutions that are affordable to poor people that they can do themselves, so that they don't just become beneficiaries and victims of this process of, and all of us in the adaptation space telling them, you poor thing, we tell you what to do. They want to be active participants. They want the right to access the kind of research that Catherine is talking about. and which all of you are discussing with food and water and everything, so that they make informed choices themselves, they demonstrate what others can do, and they can make new demands on their cities, their countries, and all of us globally. So wish us luck.
Thank you, Sheila. Very powerful and very...
À présent, mesdames et messieurs, ce fut l'une des sessions de la 5e journée dans la conférence de la COP27, la conférence des parties prenantes à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies pour les changements climatiques, COP27. Il est à noter que plein d'activités se passent tous les jours à partir de son début le dimanche et officiellement par les présidents et les chefs d'État le lundi passé. La conférence se poursuit, chers téléspectateurs, jusqu'au 18 novembre 2022. Et à présent, une petite pause et on vous retrouve tout de suite après.
It's the world's most witnessed event. The Mother of the World invites you to confront together the climate crisis. Efforts united in fulfilling global goals. Solutions for the world's most pressing challenges. COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, 2022.
إنني وإذ أتطلع إلى استقبالكم من قمة المناخ 27 التي تستضيفها مصر في شرم الشيخ.
Mesdames et messieurs, l'Égypte accueille toujours le sommet sur le climat de Sharm el-Sheikh et les dirigeants mondiaux sont présents pour discuter des dangers de la pollution climatique dans le monde. Une session de la COP27 a lieu actuellement. Voyons ensemble.
Or in food and agriculture, climate resilient systems, all of those solutions, what is the opportunity by 2030? Those adaptation outcomes are actually based on that experience of implementation that are existing and allowing us to have a much more manageable agenda to gear action towards, to facilitate planning, but as well the mobilization of the finance that we need. So I want to thank the panel. This has been a very enriching discussion, so thank you very much. We're going to go straight to our next person invited, and afterward we're going to have two panels where we can open more space for reflections. I'm a little bit afraid we're running out of time, so it's okay in that sense. So thank you, Karen, Sylvie, Anna, Sheila, and Ashlyn. Thank you. So it's my pleasure now, as we heard this discussion, as well, the perspective of the people, the ones that are experiencing those challenges. And we've invited Emithal Mahmoud, who is a poet, UN Refugee Agency Goodwill Ambassador, and an activist, to share with us her interpretation of the urgency. Emmy, please.
If you are reading this, I forgive you. You have grown far from the heart of me, my child, have lost the familiar love we held for one another in your first years of life. When you were young, you used to marvel at the plants and critters that ran across my bosom. You worshipped the water, swam up and down my rivers, you drank from my rain, laughed at each first snow, begged for sun on the cloudy days. You didn't hesitate to sink your fingers into the mud of me and tickle loose little seedlings, droplets, pebbles, and worms. How you built a refuge for every wayward wanderer, lining the kitchen shelves and jars of lightning bugs and fireflies. How you came to me, resting your head at my tender hearth, your weary body in my pockets. You loved me. You drank the sap, gum, honey from my trees, drank the breeze. You nurtured me before you knew what it was to nurture, tended me before you knew what it was to tend. Tiller, sower, farmer, green-thumbed little one, you knew me. Lately, you hurt me. You break and cut and tear into me, and I forgive you. For I am a part of you, like your brothers and sisters before you, so I forgive you. I forgive you again for the reaping you do with no intention to sow, again for the waste and greed and gluttony when you were young. You used to ask me why they do this. Once brothers and sisters, now spilling the blood of your people into the earth, shaking apart the branches of your family tree. You losing ground and hope all in one fell swoop. You came to me, begged me to make sense of it all. You rested your head under the shade of date palms and magnolias. All I could offer you then was a promise that wherever you would go, you would find me. But lately, there isn't much left for me to promise. They've dug pits into my sides, have stolen the rubies, gold, and diamonds Maya placed in my thighs. I do all I can to heal. My weary body won't clear away the hurt so easily. My waters rush, but do not soothe. The air in my lungs suffocates the little ones. I cough and spew and gush and bruise, and it will not heal when a child of mine dies by my hand. Here, In the long forgotten valley of your youth, visitors come not of their own accord but by necessity. Abdul Ghani and Izdihara sink their fingers into the mud of me. Saplings cling and I am made whole again. Hatim builds monuments to my skies, captures the sun, channels the lightning, and I am whole again. Luca and Layatu surround their homes in fruit born of me. The children eat and grow and are healthy, and I am whole. Usman protests, "It isn't mine alone to mend," he says. "I need you to build and build again, to make new, to bring forth life from relentless earth, making an oasis of charred terrain, building a refuge from only scar tissue and lightning strikes. Let me be more to you than just a final resting place. Let me do more for you than call you home. Child of mine, if you are reading this, I need you, your mother. If this land could speak, would she thank us, praise us, ridicule us, or beg us? Would her voice be wary, gentle, disdainful? Would it shake with sorrow, with rage? I used to wonder about these things all of the time. At 11 years old, I watched my neighbor's house crumble before my eyes. The floodwaters came and washed away the earth and clay most people used to build their homes. To see her wade through her house like that, to watch her try and salvage what little she had left. Our country was already locked in turmoil, and now the earth began to purge us too. If you could stop the next tornado from leveling your home, the next hurricane from wiping out your city, the next drought from starving your people, or the next lightning strike from ending your life, wouldn't you? The locusts in the Horn of Africa, the floods in South Sudan, the ice in Chicago, the fires in California, Australia. We are at the precipice of possible change, a turning point that can and will define us. Fire or ice, how will the world end? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. Not in this generation, and not in the next. Thank you.
Eh bien, c'était une des participantes à la COP27, conférence des parties à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques COP27 qui se tient actuellement à Sharm el-Sheikh. L'objectif de la COP27 est la mise en place des accords signés et des promesses prises lors des récentes conférences à Paris ou à Glasgow. Une très petite pause.
إنني وإذ أتطلع إلى استقبالكم من قمة المناخ 27 التي تستضيفها مصر في شرم الشيخ.
Et nous poursuivons, chers téléspectateurs, les activités de cette 5e journée de la conférence des conventions cadres des parties prenantes à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques COP27. Et à présent, nous passons à une nouvelle session. Voyons ensemble.
تساهم في السوق العالمي بنسبة 2%. ونرى أيضا أن نسبة 6% من أسواق التصدير تهتم أو تكون مندرجة تحت منتجات تلك الغابات. هناك الكثير من المؤسسات والتحديات التي نواجهها ويجب أن يتم الاهتمام بها. إذن يجب أن نعالج هذه الأمور وأن نفهم تلك التحديات التي تواجهنا حتى نستطيع
Finally, there's the matter of what has already been deforested. And Brazil can certainly make much better use of this area. So Brazil has already cleared about 1/5 of its Amazon vegetation, right? And today, that area largely holds pasture. So pasture areas occupy about 2/3 of what has already been cleared. Now, if we keep productivity levels in these areas as they are today, and if we are to meet increasing demand for meat products in the future, then we would need to deforest by 2030 at least 10 million more hectares to occupy to accommodate increasing production. Now, the key issue here is that productivity in Amazon pastures is extremely low. So there's room to substantially increase productivity. If Brazil manages to increase livestock productivity by a factor of 3, which doesn't mean that this isn't a major technological jump. This merely means adopting practices that have already been adopted elsewhere in the country. Right? If we increase productivity by a factor of 3, we would be able to meet the projections for increased demand, right? Produce livestock in the Amazon and still free up an area that is estimated at 37 million hectares. To give you a sense of how large this area is, it would be able to hold the entire world production of coffee, cocoa, and latex. In this area, could be used, of course, to accommodate these markets that I mentioned previously, for example, for restoration and for forest-compatible products. Now, so overall, the Amazon 2030 project is aware that making a shift to this different path towards sustainable socio-economic development in the region holds several challenges. But the framing of the Amazon paradox gives us some insight into how we can actually move towards this the sustainable socio-economic development. It is, of course, absolutely urgent that Brazil take action now to be able to make that shift. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clarissa. Now we will have the Secretary of State of Pará State to comment about what Pará is doing to go through this challenge in the state where he is working now.
Bom dia a todos, permitam-me falar em português. Meu nome é Mauro de Almeida, eu sou secretário de Estado de Meio Ambiente e Sustentabilidade do Pará. Eu gostaria de agradecer primeiramente ao convite feito pelo coletivo Amazônia 2030 por estar aqui e dizer que essa apresentação da Clarissa Na verdade, o Estado do Pará tem usado de insumos do alto nível de profissionais e cientistas que o Amazônia 2030 tem coordenado para transformar esses insumos em política pública. 2 deles foram citados aí, que é a questão das oportunidades que nós temos em de transformar a restauração florestal numa restauração produtiva, uma restauração também regenerativa, em que dê oportunidade de uma transformação econômica do Estado do Pará, e para isso nós vamos lançar aqui na COP as diretrizes do Plano Estadual de Restauração Florestal. A outra parte que a Clarissa mencionou é a questão dos bens ou dos produtos da Amazônia ou vinculados à floresta amazônica e que tem espaço econômico para ter uma exportação ou serem líderes de exportação e que hoje ainda não alcançam esse mercado de exportação. Nós temos um programa chamado Bioeconomia Pé no Chão, em que nós utilizamos os insumos de pesquisa do professor Salo Kozlovski para transformar isso em política pública. O mais importante é que esses achados da pesquisa da doutora Clarissa expressam o que o Estado do Pará demanda. É um Estado, assim como a Amazônia, conflagrado, é um Estado que precisa virar a página como da regularização fundiária, é um Estado que precisa do apoio e suporte do governo federal para que a gente combata o desmatamento ilegal. Em perspectiva, dizer que em 4 anos em que houve uma descoordenação das ações de comando e controle, e o Pará, ainda que liderem as taxas de desmatamento, vinha numa curva descendente de desmatamento, já é uma vitória. O Estado do Pará escolheu ou priorizou fazer o combate ao desmatamento nas áreas sob jurisdição do Estado do Pará. O Estado do Pará tem 70% do seu território de propriedade da União, e nós escolhemos, então, fazer o combate ao desmatamento ilegal na área dos 30% do Estado do Pará, e é essa curva descendente que nós vimos alcançando no decorrer dos anos. De 18 para 19 houve um aumento de mais de 50% de desmatamento, mas de 19 para 20 já houve um decréscimo de 17% em relação a 19, depois veio mais 7% de 21 em relação a 20. Então a curva de desmatamento era descendente e muito provavelmente nós alcançaríamos, se não fosse agora um novo repique de desmatamento, evidentemente por conta de todo o processo político, as pressões políticas, etc., que estavam ocorrendo no Estado do Pará, a gente houve um repique de desmatamento, mas mesmo assim a gente acha que a gente empata. É preciso lembrar que no Estado do Pará, e é bom a Clarice também ter esse achado, de que nós precisamos focar na juventude, nessa juventude que não tem ocupação, ou que tem potencial de ocupação, para fazer 2 coisas. Primeiro, nós temos que comunicar melhor o que seja a agenda ambiental e a agenda climática. De cada 5 pessoas da Amazônia, 2 nunca ouviram falar no termos mudanças climáticas nem agenda climática. Isso é muita gente. Então nós temos um problema de comunicação, nós temos um problema de educação, nós temos um problema de conscientização. O Estado, nos 10 municípios que mais desmatam no Pará, o atual presidente venceu as eleições. E venceu as eleições de um percentual elevado. O que isso quer dizer? O que isso quer demonstrar do ponto de vista da comunicação ou da cultura? Será que toda a população desses 10 municípios que desmatam estão aderentes à política que foi feita até agora pelo atual governo federal? É preciso a gente investigar e é preciso a gente não desprezar esse dado e não abandonar essas pessoas. É preciso fazer com que essas pessoas desses municípios venham para o lado que é o do desenvolvimento sustentável, o lado da agenda, o lado da conservação, com oportunidade de emprego. E eu acho que é esse o maior legado que não só esse estudo da Clarissa Gandu, que ela coordenou, mas como outros estudos que estão saindo do Amazônia 2030, possam subsidiar políticas públicas transformadoras, inovadoras e que mudem a chave da economia do Estado do Pará e da Amazônia Legal como um todo. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Secretary Mauro de Almeida. Just to add here that it's really important to highlight that Pará State is the second in the quantity of bovines in the Brazilian Amazon. It means that there are lots of areas that can be recovered to increase also productivity and to be liberated to be used for restoration, to increase the productivity, to generate jobs. So it's a big challenge, but it's not impossible to reach zero deforestation in Pará State. So thank you very much for being here with us. We can open now for questions, if somebody have a question. João? Do you have a question, João? Okay, he is coming.
Hello, I have a question. It's about deforestation. I would like to ask to Mauro, how exactly you did to fight deforestation in the state areas of Pará State? You used the police of the state, because I think that it's very important for understanding what other states of the legal Amazon can do to fight deforestation.
Local capacity for verification, for project development, for certification, so that we ensure that this opportunity on the continent is affordable, is suited for smaller size projects, which is what we will see coming from the continent. There will be other objectives, but those are some of the ones we will target. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. It is very clear that a common thread during COP27, the days that have passed, is about financing for development. You know, and when we speak about carbon markets, the question has been, why are we putting carbon markets up front when there are issues of greenwashing and so forth? But we are focusing on financing adaptation and resilience for the communities. Can you unpack that statement a little bit more?
That's a very good statement. Let's see. So I think from the Africa Carbon Market Initiative's perspective, in order to ensure that there is adequate finance flows into the continent, and in order to ensure that that flow is to adaptation and resilience, besides identifying the right projects, besides developing the right methodologies, it's also very important to ensure that there's integrity. Integrity on the side of the projects. So are they designed well? Do they benefit those who deserve that benefit? The smallholder farmers, the local communities involved in conservation, and so on. And on the other side of that, the greenwashing question. So the initiative will work with companies that have signed up to very specific principles that mitigate against the issue of greenwashing. This cannot be an area where there's no confidence. If we're going to achieve that ambition, the transparency, the credibility is imperative. And so it's extremely important that we ensure that whoever signs up to this initiative, particularly the private companies, have made commitments and are working towards the principles we have indicated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we can all agree that the individual efforts of regions, cities, businesses, and investors can really just take climate action so far. And we need to make sure that as we are racing towards in this decade of action, we need more consolidated efforts and ensure that we are working towards the same goal and we are co-conspirators. And I just want to take a moment and open up for the floor before I close. And I recognize a few faces, so please, if I call you out, bask in the spotlight. I I give to you. So I'd like to call out Olajobi Makira, yes, of the lead of the Africa Business Leaders Coalition at UN Global Compact. From your perspective, we met last night. We saw a big statement by the private sector. Can you tell us why it's important that we have a coalition of African businesses making commitments towards a greener future?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Boholo, and thank you everyone. Let me actually read from the statement that was released yesterday by the private sector. Let me read it so that you can hear the voice or voices of these 56 CEOs from Pan-African CEOs. Let me read. I have, the 56 CEOs, 56 chief executive officers and chairpersons from a diverse range of sectors representing more than $150 billion US in revenue and over 1,000 employees across 50 African countries said that they believe that the African private sector is uniquely positioned to positively shape the future of our continent and improve the welfare of our communities. So they believe in that. They also said that they commit. So the statement is not only issuing statement, they were making bold commitment. This is historic and unique. They said they commit to participate in the UN Global Compact and to uphold its 10 principles in its business practices and with its suppliers and customers. So not only taking action within their own companies, but within their supply chain. They said they commit to robust company resilience plans to improve its adaptive capacity and build systemic resilience by explicitly accounting for climate risks in its business and investment and enabling its suppliers to do the same. They commit to uphold the guiding principles of a just transition as central to all our climate actions and advocacy. They commit to set company targets to drastically increase the share of renewables in our energy use. They also commit to elevate the voice of the African private sector and bring the African perspective to global stages, such as COP27. And they said Africa cannot do this alone.
Right.
And they called on the international community to join us in addressing these issues. So indeed, the African private sector, through the UN Global Compact, the Africa Business Leaders Coalition, we are ready to move. We are ready to work to support. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Olajobi. Indeed, in relation to the implementation of the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, it is very pleasing to have such landmark commitments from the African non-state actors, and in particular, the private sector. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for listening and for being part of this discussion. But I want to leave you with very key thoughts out of the adaptation agenda. And those are, in order for us to deliver climate action, whole-scale transformations are needed on two fronts. So we ask you to be part of these two fronts. One, to get to net zero emissions as soon as possible to prevent incremental damage. And two, to significantly increase actions and investments to adapt now to the current and unavoidable impacts of climate change, putting people and nature first in pursuit of a resilient world where we don't just survive climate shocks and stresses, but we do thrive in spite of these shocks. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you very much, Poholo. And thank you to all the speakers for a great conversation. For our next panel discussion, we're going to zoom out and look at the global finance landscape. In this panel, we will learn about the role of the private sector from the perspective of national and regional governments, as well as to hear an exciting joint announcement by the insurance sector and the high-level climate champions. Please welcome Kathy Bachman-McLeod, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of the Adrienne Arch Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council, to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good afternoon. What time is it? I'm Kathy Boffman-McLeod, and I run the Adrian R. Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. We call it RSTROC for short. And I'll just jump right to the heart of the matter, and that is that I love insurance. And I love insurance to solve climate problems. Now, raise your hand if you love insurance for solving climate problems. Yes, yes, you have come to the right session. All right. So we're going to explore some exciting things that are about to be announced. And the insurance sector has been in this and trying to find, and I say this with great love and respect to the industry, trying to find their best role in helping to finance, unlock capital, reduce risk, and provide recovery money. And so much has been achieved. There are immense efforts, and soon, very soon, there will be an announcement about a coalescence of those efforts in an effort to accelerate the role that insurance risk transfer can play in expanding finance for adaptation and resilience. And one of the key things to think about insurance is that insurance, think of it as a market, but think of insurance as an approach. And when you think about taking risk from one place and putting it someplace else, it doesn't mean that somebody has to, it's not always a commercial activity. And so there are very creative ways to use insurance to get where we want to go. And I think we all agree that whatever we've been doing that got us here is not going to get us there. And so I think today, on Resilience Day, it marks a change. Don't leave, it's really exciting, I promise. I'm just kidding. I know, I'm just teasing. So let me get the panelists, come on up. I won't delay the excitement any longer. If you all could come to the stage here. There's one thing I want to give a plug for extreme heat. You know, we've been talking about global warming for 60 years. We are not talking about heat. And heat is killing more people than any of the climate hazards. We don't want it to be a competition. We do not. But we do want a silent and invisible threat to be named, to be raised, the awareness of it raised. We want to bring policy and finance solutions, and heat is all around us, and it doesn't have the governance, the season, the advocacy, or even the financial architecture around it. And so at RSTROC, where we have pledged to reach 1 billion people with resilience solutions, we are pledging to bring heat, give it a visual brand, give it an identity to save lives. And so we are engaging and have for some time the insurance industry around pre-event trigger-based financing that comes before. And you all, many of you in the industry know that 60% of our disasters are predicted and 2% of the funding comes in front of the disaster. So that is a huge mismatch, and we can do something about that. And I think today's conversation is going to help us understand that and help us understand how we can attract more capital of all kinds into these essential adaptation funding streams and financing streams. And yesterday, I'm very pleased that we announced with lots of wonderful partners the Cool Capital Stack. And that is a collection, a portfolio, pipeline, $750 million worth of projects that will cool cities and technologies that will help protect people and economies. So more on that later, but let me ask our panelists here to come on up. May I ask Julian Inoizi, the Global Head of Public Sector from Guy Carpenter. Come on up. Hello, Julian. And on behalf of His Excellency Bakoa Kaltonga, who's the Special Envoy on Climate Change for the Republic of Vanuatu, we have Malcolm Delesa, who is the Climate Change Attaché at the UN Mission of Vanuatu. And so, Malcolm, could I ask you to come on up? Thank you so much. And then Dr. Megan Spires, please join us, the Director of Energy and Resilience at ICLEI. Super. Okay. And I'm going to come sit with you. Yep, I am. Okay. So let me just crack on. Let's just get into the role of the private sector in this. Just get us grounded, if you don't mind, in the role of the private sector in financing adaptation and resilience.
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much.
Here, take this one.
Hello. Okay, great. Thanks so much for having ICLEI here. I'm going to respond to that question in relation to our cities work and our urban work, which is at the core of what ICLEI does, working with over 2,500 cities, regions, and towns across the world. And I've been very humbled in listening to the panelists before me to hear about the issues around oceans, issues around youth, the issues and the solutions that the insurance sector and others are bringing to the party. Our agenda is really the urban agenda. And the urban challenge is not uniform across the globe. 90% of urban growth between now and 2050 is going to happen in Africa and Asia. 55% of the global population in extreme poverty and facing high flood risk is in sub-Saharan Africa. So there is a regional disparity in terms of adaptation and resilience that we need to tackle. And for us, it's really exciting as a city network to see the private sector coming to the fore and coming to the party. There is still a major gap around finance. Something like 0.7% of global climate finance flows to urban Africa, and when you heard the statistics around the challenges that urban Africa is going to be facing, we need to fix this problem. And I think part of it is that the current ecosystem or architecture of financial flows is not equipped for the finance to flow to cities and towns and regions to be able to do the work contextually based in response to adaptation challenges. So we've been with our partners building the coalition of cities and regions that join Race to Resilience. It was mentioned by the high-level champion that we're not at the scale in terms of numbers, in terms of commitments, but these 72 cities and regions do represent 67 million people globally, which is a significant proportion. And these cities are now reporting into what's called the ICLEI CDP track. And you know the age-old saying, if you don't monitor, you can't measure and you can't adapt. And all of these cities now are monitoring what they need from an adaptation perspective and putting numbers to the finance that they require. The key gap that we now need to fill is working with these cities that have pledged to Race to Resilience in unlocking finance to actually implement those commitments. And so our response to, yes, building more numbers would be, let's first look at these 72 leaders globally, these 72 leading cities and regions, and help them to access the finance that will allow them to adapt to climate change. And if I can respond maybe to a second question later, I wanted to give 3 examples of what ICLEI is already doing to do this in 3 different regions. Should I do that now?
Well, I'll come back around
Great.
and get that. I think this is, oh, great, okay. So now let me turn to you, Julian, and ask the same question. Can you talk about the role of the insurance sector in accelerating adaptation finance?
Sure. Thank you, Kathy, and just say it's a real privilege to be here at COP. I guess in terms of insurance, you heard from the previous delegation from Africa about how they're looking to put a community-based approach, and you talked in your introduction about anticipatory finance and 60% of it being predictable, but only 2% going to anticipatory finance. And I think what we as an industry are looking to do, working with the high-level champions, with the Race to Resilience, and with yourselves, is to shift that debate and move that dialogue. I think Dr. Kathy talked earlier about not having one win at a time. Insurance in many respects is one win at a time because you're paying one claim at a time, and so many of the initiatives that we've looked to do here are to highlight how anticipatory financing as opposed to post-disaster financing. And secondly, and I'm going to give some examples of that, and the report that we're launching today contains about 17 examples of that, But what we're trying to do is to then catalyze a dialogue with the insurance and reinsurance industry and to scale that so that it isn't one win at a time, but you start to really scale anticipatory finance that then builds resilience rather than just waiting for disaster to strike and then paying out after the event. So if I give a couple of examples, and these are quite innovative, but if you just look at ideas like parametric finance, which tends to be trigger-based, actually using that parametric tool to pay out in advance of a typhoon hitting. So if you actually think about giving $30 to somebody who's in the path of a typhoon, what that allows them to do is to, first of all, move their family out of harm's way, but secondly, to put measures in place to protect their business so that when they return after the event, they can get back up on their feet more quickly. Other examples are, somebody talked about the mangrove forests earlier, creating an investment vehicle, an insurance-linked security, if you like, that allows investment not only by capital markets but also by philanthropists, so that they can actually fulfill the commercial needs of getting a return on their investment, but actually at the same time putting in place natural defenses. And then the last example I'll give, which goes to this one win at a time idea, is the idea of buying insurance on a community basis, so community-based catastrophe insurance. And what that allows you to do is to buy insurance for a whole city, as opposed to relying on individuals to buy a policy, which often take-up is poor. But that also allows for reduction in price because of the economy of scale of a city buying, and you can then invest that saving into defenses that are required by the city so that you increase resilience and increase take-up of the insurance. So all of those things are approaches which we want to try and do effectively the equivalent for the climate to what the insurance industry has done in the past with the invention of the seatbelt or the invention of the fire engine. What is the equivalent for climate? And that's really what the call to arms today is.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I just want to note that this is noted in the agenda as a fireside chat, and I just find some humor in that. You know, it's a climate conference, it's a fireside chat. Maybe we want to rebrand a little bit on the chat we're having. So, Malcolm, would you share from Vanuatu's perspective in terms of how you are engaging for adaptation financing and how we're going to get to the challenges, and maybe I'll do both with you. Could you describe the state of affairs for you in terms of adaptation and resilience financing, and then talk about some of the challenges?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a delight to be part of this fire chat discussion. For Vanuatu, given a small island developing state with very much fragile economy, adaptation financing is something that's very much vital. Just in terms of example, in 2015 we were hit by a Category 5 cyclone, and insurance has very much helped the government, particularly this is more with the public sector, to recover and restore infrastructure. Was that the P-CRIC? Yep. You were in, yeah. Yeah, the Pacific Risk Insurance Facility. Pacific Risk Insurance Facility. That's right. And more recently, working with the UN Capital Development Fund in terms of where parametric insurance is concerned in supporting farmers, as we know, the climate-sensitive nature of the sector, and that will be channeled through, facilitated through our Vanuatu Primary Producers Authority. So these are examples of certain funding that will very much help our farmers, and particularly fragile sectors in anticipating the impacts and helping a much quicker path to resilience. So very much adaptation, financing and funds and the modalities, pathways are critical for a country with a narrow-based economy and with livelihoods very much dependent on climate-sensitive sectors like agriculture.
Thank you very much. And so maybe we'll just come back around. And you wanted to talk about some of the things that ICLEI is doing. And so we'll just talk about some solutions. And I think solutions and opportunities is the next round. This is a bit of a lightning panel. So we'll go back around. And then next we'll have Emma Howard-Boyd come up in just a little bit. So over to you.
Sure. Maybe because we were talking a lot about insurance, I'll speak first about an insurance initiative that a colleague of mine is leading in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's called the Urban Infrastructure Insurance Facility. And the idea is to pool the risk of up to 10 cities in these locations so that they can get tailor-made insurance covering at least 7.5 million people and up to $100 million US being mobilized for infrastructure to build it back better. And this is really a first for ICLEI globally, that as a city network we were engaging directly with insurers in the insurance industry to actually be providing these tailor-made solutions to our cities. And it's been a long road coming, where we came from early days of taking insurance companies to our cities and introducing them. And in those days, most of the time the insurance companies were selling their products to the city officials, to this situation where we really feel that as a non-political, neutral platform organization, we're providing a real opportunity for cities to get good deals that make sense to them, and helping them to navigate this complex process. You know, we speak about the difficulty of engaging with perhaps the climate science language, but similarly on the finance side, you know, the way financiers and insurance companies speak is often very overwhelming to city officials, that it's not how they engage. And so the particular role we play is a knowledge brokering between these two realms, governments that know how to govern their cities and financiers and funders that know how to run insurance programs or unlock finance. The other piece that we're doing is developing a strong pipeline of projects that are moving much closer towards bankability, and then directly discussing it with potential DFIs to fund those projects. And the big lesson for us there has been around managing expectations. If you engage with a mayor or a government official around an exciting project that they want to develop, there's a plethora of projects, but only very few of those can move to being financially viable and into project pipelines of development finance institutions. And so we've become much more nuanced in our approach of actually tailoring the projects that we're developing with cities so that they feed directly into an existing DFI mechanism. And we're starting to now see unlocking of quite significant feasibility study money from these DFIs to ultimately close the deal. A lot of our work is with intermediate and small cities, which are actually housing most of the urban population globally. So you're talking cities of between 400 or 500,000 people that really need the most help in building capacity. And in light of this, we've just recently launched a climate finance course for subnational governments through the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa. And so there's still a desperate need around capacity building, networking, and then bridging this often divide between private and public sector, government and donors. I think we're moving in the right direction, but particularly in the adaptation realm, there's still a lot of work to be done, which is why we're so excited about this insurance project in Latin America.
Thank you very much. Those are all very exciting and positive things. Julian, so are you officially announcing a report right now? Is this it? Is this that moment?
Yes, this is that moment. The joint report between Marsh McLennan, Arsh Rock, and the Race to Resilience, and it is about the insurance industry moving from what it's traditionally known for to different types of financing along the lines that I mentioned. You talked a little bit about pooling arrangements. I spent the last 9 years of my life running a public-private partnership in the United Kingdom, and what we found was that we were never going to have enough money, even though I'd built up an asset base of about $10 billion. We were never going to have enough money to pay for losses. And so we started to invest some of that money into anticipatory, preemptive risk mitigation techniques. And this report really is promoting that and saying, here are a list of 17 of these different ideas from around the world. The democratization, if you like, of the sorts of instruments that the insurance industry is renowned for, like modeling, for example, and how can you use that in better planning for these cities so that they make better investment decisions when they're thinking about spending taxpayers' money. But actually, how do you then scale that? Because, again, I referred to the previous speaker of, one by one isn't going to get us there. So how do we scale this so that we're actually starting to make a big impact? A little bit like you said, if we could shift the emphasis of 88% of, 88 cents in the dollar of being spent in paying claims to even, a bigger proportion of that being spent on pre-event mitigation, that could have a massive impact when you consider that $1 spent in risk mitigation yields about a $12 saving in post-event losses. So there's a huge prize at stake here.
And lives saved and trauma avoided, and so many human things that are also avoided in that. So I want to just switch hats really quickly and say, as the partner in the project, I want to recognize my colleague Jorge Gastelamendi and your partner Francis Bouchard for their work on this report. You're going to have access to it very shortly, but it's exciting to see it all in one place, and these projects are tangible and exciting. So anyway, congratulations to you and to us and all of the partners. Malcolm, a last word from you. What's next for Vanuatu? What is the adaptation and resilience agenda for you, for COP, but also what's your priority in Vanuatu?
Thank you. For Vanuatu, more generally, I think given the theme as well of this whole event and COP, especially in elevating the youth voices, we've been supporting the youths with this ICJ advisory opinion, which is something that was been very much driven by the youths, but we feel that it will also help in supporting, and there's synergies with driving climate ambition overall and implementation, especially with NDC. So that's something that we're very much hopeful that with all that work, once an advisory opinion is given, we will ensure that we will work with partners and as well look to, especially with say financing, and go beyond the aspects by which we can explore means of risk financing and impact investing, philanthropic financing as well, to level that climate risk curve that vulnerable communities very much.
Wonderful. We need all that full continuum of capital, from the philanthropy to the blended, to the insurance, to the commercial capital, and yes, more quickly.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Let me ask you to thank our panel, and I would like to, yes, let's thank our panel, please. Thank you. And there's so much more to learn about this, the power of insurance to accelerate finance on resilience and adaptation, the metrics and evaluations available to go with it, these speakers and this report. It's just delicious, delicious stuff. So let me ask Marcia to come up and introduce Emma Howard Boyd. Thank you, Marcia. Should we exit left? Yes. Okay, let's exit. Okay.
And thank you, everybody, for your attention, your energy. We are coming to the close of our event. As you recognize, we've captured the many different comments, ideas, suggestions, interpretations. Also, the first hour and a half on the drawings, live drawings, we're going to paste it as a result of the event. And now, after hearing to such promising news on finance and the insurance sector, I'm pleased to close out this conversation today by welcoming Emma Howard-Boyd to the stage. Emma Howard-Boyd is the UN Global Ambassador for the Race to Zero and Race to Resilient campaigns. Until up very recently, she was chair of the Environment Agency in the UK, a public body responsible for the protection and enhancement of the environment in England. She is an ex-officio board member of the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and interim chair of the Green Finance Institute. Emma was also the UK Commissioner to the Global Commission on Adaptation from 2019 until January 2021. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Marcia. And I will make some short closing remarks. I also am a co-chair of the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, which is a partner to the